Okay, MA1 Ferguson here today to discuss the M4 carbine, M4A1, the assault rifle that you guys would be issued in a military sense. Okay, so a few things we got to talk about. Yes, mine has some interesting modifications and things like that, but generally speaking, this is basically what you're looking at as far as the weapon that you would be issued. You've got a two-piece Picatinny railed style handguard. This is a Surefire model where you'll probably have a CAC version, which stands for Knight's Armament. I've also got a weapon light mounted on mine and a red dot sight, which you guys will see red dot sights and perhaps lights mounted on some of yours as well. Standard carbine link gas system, a flip up rear sight, and a standard M4 collapsible buttstock. So right now we've got loaded magazines. These are called magazines. They are not called clips on the table. So we need to move them out of the workspace completely so that we can safely handle the firearm. And we'll talk about all those parts and components. So as you can see, my workspace here is totally empty. We're going to do a safety check. I'm going to collapse this buttstock down. It has multiple positions. Most of the military have either 4 or 6 position. I'm going to collapse it down so we can have as much room as possible to work with the gun. So now let's make sure that it's unloaded. I'm going to both visually and physically inspect the chamber. So I am visually looking into the chamber through the ejection port, and then I will physically stick my hand in there and in the magazine well and make sure that there is no ammunition present in the firearm, at which point I can then pull the trigger. Now I got a dead trigger and we're safe to handle this weapon. Okay, so since the actual weapon light is not important in this instance, I'm going to take it off to make it easier to lay the gun down on its side and things like that. And we're going to start discussing everything from tip to butt. Okay, tip to butt. So let's start with nomenclature. The first nomenclature that's important for us to know is the muzzle device. Okay, the muzzle is the bare end of the barrel. Okay, this is the business end. All right, this is where the projectiles leave. All right, and they travel off in that direction and do what they do. Your muzzle device serves 2 purposes in a military sense. Okay, it's both a flash hider and a compensator of sorts. So what do I mean by that? Well, it hides flash by utilizing these 5 basically grooves that are cut into it. All right, and these ports allow the muzzle blast to come up and out. All right, and when they come up and out, they dissipate flash. So instead of having a nice big fireball in front of your muzzle, you just have a couple little fingers of it here, and it reduces. It doesn't make it invisible, but it reduces it by, I would say, 85 to 90%. It makes it much harder for an enemy to figure out where you're shooting at them from. Okay, and then the second thing that it does is compensate. When a weapon fires, it normally recoils to the rear and up, right? That's kind of the direction that it recoils. Okay, I'm exaggerating this here because this weapon has very little recoil, but that's the way it works. And so if you notice with this muzzle device, you've got the ports across the top, but check this out. It's fully enclosed on the bottom. That serves 2 purposes. Number 1, all the gas that is expelled out of it is expelled up, helping to keep your muzzle down during firing. So instead of this happening when it fires, more of just a straight line push occurs. Also, by having the bottom enclosed, when you're laying prone on the ground and this distance is very short and you're in a dusty environment, it helps prevent dust and debris from being kicked up back into the shooter's face. Okay, so that is your A2 bird cage flash hider. Okay, that's the muzzle device on the M4 carbine you guys are issued. Now the barrel here, this is only part of it. You can see that's exposed right here. The barrel is 14.5 inches long on your version. This happens to be a 16-inch gun. All right, so literally the only difference between this version and the military version is about that. Okay, the military version's got a barrel about that long. This one has a barrel that long. Whoopity-doo-dah. All right, otherwise the same. This is your A2 style front sight post and gas block. It does two things. First, it houses the front sight, okay? That pin there sitting up in the middle, all right, is the actual front sight itself, okay? And these wings on either side protect that front sight because it's kind of fragile, right? And then also inside of here, you can see there's a small roll pin right here where my finger is. That roll pin holds a gas tube in place. Now I'll show you the gas tube where it is exposed. You can see a small piece of stainless steel right here in between the upper receiver and the handguard. That piece of stainless steel is a gas tube. It is a small cylindrical tube that travels from here, all right, make sure I'm in frame, from here in the front sight all the way into the actual receiver itself, and that's what operates the mechanism. So it's gas operated, all right? This thing is gas operated. There's a small hole drilled in the barrel, and when it's fired, gas comes up out of that hole, through the tube, into the receiver, and it impinges on the action, and it causes this to happen. And then it self-loads. It's a self-loading rifle, okay? So, with that being said, that's how it's operated, and that's the front sight block and the gas tube. Then you'll see the hand guard. Okay, like I said, you guys will have the CAC hand guards, but it's the same thing. It's a two-piece hand guard that drops in, and it's held by this ring. This is called a delta ring. All right, and you drop in the bottom and then the top, and you have this Picatinny rail. And the beautiful thing about the Picatinny rail is it allows you to mount attachments. Just like I showed you earlier with my flashlight, okay? I can mount stuff anywhere I want to on the gun. Or in my case, I like to have a 12 o'clock offset mount so that I can mount stuff up here, and it gets it up out of the way and out of the line of sight of the bore. But the point is it's an accessory attachment device, and it protects you from heat because the barrel and the gas tube both get hot. So the hand guard is where your hand should go to have positive control of the weapon. I recommend not getting too close back here. I like to keep my hand as far out front as possible, and I even like to put a thumb over the top to help control muzzle rise. But don't get your hand on this front sight block because it gets hot, all right? So with all that being said, that's the hand guard. It acts as a heat shield to guard your hand and a mounting device for accessories, lasers, lights, and all sorts of good stuff, okay? Now, the delta ring, like we said, put it right here so you guys can see. It's just spring loaded, and that's what holds that handguard in place. If you pull back on it, these things will come apart. But no need to do that in basic field stripper maintenance for your guys' purposes in the 100-200. This is a red dot sight. Don't get too excited about it. It has a quick release mount. The versions that you guys have will be the M68 CCO, close combat optic, that's designated by the United States Army and Air Force. It's got a similar mount, but it has a thumb screw instead of a quick detach lever. But it's still very easy to do. So it's literally just a tube that has a red dot. Okay, so when you look through it, all right, you're looking through this little toilet paper roll tube, and there will be a red dot shown in there for you to use and aim with. But for our purposes, we're going to make sure we're focusing on iron sights more than the red dot. So this is the top rail of your receiver. It's also Picatinny rail just like this, so you can mount things like sights and iron sights. And here is your rear flip-up sight. This is an ARMS version made by a company called ARMS. And it has a similar aperture to what you guys will have with the Mautic. The Mautic will have a reticle like this, all right, which is more open for low light shooting or very, very close range. That's why the aperture is so large. And then it will have a smaller one, which is for further distance or bright daylight shooting for precision, all right. This one also happens to have a little pistol U-notch too, for specialty purposes up close, but that's not really relevant to you guys. So that's your flip up rear sight. Now this particular one is deployed like so I can keep it down and out of the way until I need it, and then when I need it, I deploy it, okay? The version that you have will most likely have either a button that you press, or you'll just kind of like flip it up, all right? So depending on which version the Air Force has mounted on your rifles. But the principles remains the same. It's a flip up sight with a peep that you look through. And when you look through that peep, you ensure that that front sight post is aligned dead center inside of your sight picture. All right, now moving on. This is your ejection port, and you can see the dust cover around the ejection port. You can watch it open. There you go, see it opened. So dust cover, ejection port. So your ejection port is where spent shell casings are ejected from the firearm once they've been fired. The thing that you see moving inside of here is the bolt and bolt carrier assembly. Okay, bolt and bolt carrier assembly. Bolt carrier carries the bolt. The bolt is what locks and chambers around into the chamber, and it keeps it safe while firing. And then the gas comes back and unlocks the bolt and allows it to self-load. Okay, this is a shell deflector. This raised portion of aluminum that you see here deflects the shell at least kind of at a 90-degree angle or possibly even forward, so that shells and hot brass do not hit you or your partner while firing. This little button here is known as a forward assist. I'll try and demonstrate to you what the forward assist is used for. If your firearm, this one's well broken in, so it doesn't like to do it for me, but if your firearm is dirty or has issues, can't quite get it to stick. But the point is, let me see if I can do it like this for you. If your gun is slightly out of battery, like that, instead of fully closed, slightly out of battery, you push on this forward assist and watch. It closes the bolt into battery for you. The way that you do it is not with your thumb though, but instead you just go and give it a tap. When you give it a tap, it will ensure that that bolt is in battery, okay? While you're carrying this firearm, I highly recommend that you keep the dust cover closed because it keeps dust out of the weapon, making it more reliable. This button here is a magazine release, okay? When you press the button, it releases the magazine so that it can fall from the magazine well, and then you can insert a fresh or new magazine, okay? It actuates a lever on this side, and it is in conjunction with that tab on the side of these magazines. Now, moving on. This is your bolt catch and release. It looks like a ping pong paddle. All right, the bottom of the ping paddle is the bolt catch. The top of the ping pong paddle is the bolt release function. I'll try and show you. When you lock it to the rear and you push on the bottom of the ping pong paddle and then you release, it locks the bolt to the rear, okay? So I was pushing on the bottom. When I want to send the bolt home and go forward, I push on the top of the ping pong paddle itself, all right? And it will release the bolt and it will go forward. I will now demonstrate that on this side. Okay, so what you're doing is loading the rifle with a fresh magazine, and you press that ping pong paddle and it will send the bolt home and it will load another round. Okay, that's how you do your different various reloads. Now the other thing you saw me manipulating was this T-handle, which is a charging handle. Shape of a T. You use it to charge the rifle. It's called a charging handle. It does have a latch right here on this side to keep it from coming back and smacking you in the face, which is a good thing. All right. Another safety device on these weapons is the actual safety itself. The up position is semi-automatic. All right, rotated 90 degrees like this, pointing to the front. That is safe. And on your military versions, when you have rotated past 90 degrees up, you can rotate it to a further 90 degrees where this is pointing to the rear, and that is full automatic. Some of them will have 3-round burst capability, but the vast majority of weapons in the Air Force inventory are fully automatic, okay? Which means when you're in semi-automatic mode, one pull of the trigger will fire one projectile, one round. When you're in full automatic mode, the single pull of the trigger will continue to fire until your magazine has run completely out of ammunition, or you let go. Okay, so you can squeeze and let go and it will fire however many it was able to do in that amount of time, or if you hold it until it runs out of ammunition, it will do that as well. Okay, don't recommend it. It will get very hot. It'll be difficult for you to hold on to, and you probably won't hit anything. If you're very well practiced with full automatic fire, it can be effective with very specific situations, but generally speaking, semi-automatic, controlled, aimed fire with individual squeezes of the trigger, which can be quick. You can pull the trigger very fast, but that tends to be far more effective than just spraying and praying. Okay, so you guys don't even worry about that. It's more just for fun, or you need to run across a road really quick and make the enemy put their head down. That's really the whole point. If you need real full automatic fire, you would use a belt-fed machine gun in combat. That's why you have a machine gunner in your squad or your platoon. This is really a carbine. It's an infantryman's rifle, all right? And it's designed to shoot accurate, well-aimed precision fire to reasonable distances. All right, so that's your safety lever. This is the pistol grip, pretty self-explanatory. It's the grip like a pistol where you hold it. It's a pistol grip, okay? Not rocket science. This is your collapsible buttstock. Yep, that lever lets it go, and it's got all sorts of positions. Watch, okay? Start another one. It's got all kinds of positions. So whether you're tiny or big, we got a buttstock position for you. This is your trigger itself. Clearly you can see the trigger bow. That's what this is called, or shoe. All right, you can call it either, one's the appropriate term. And this is your trigger guard. This piece of metal down here beneath it prevents stuff from coming up in here and getting into the trigger other than your finger, okay? Now, this is called the receiver extension tube, okay? And what it does is it houses a spring and a buffer, which we'll look at in just a moment when we take this weapon apart. Which, let's go ahead and do that now. So, you've got two takedown pins. Well, one, this is your takedown pin, this is your front pivot pin. Okay, but both of them are captured, meaning they don't relieve themselves from the rifle. You push from this side. I like to use my thumb, all right? And then you can pull it all the way through on this side so that it looks like so. It's captured. It won't come out. It just releases to that point. And then you can hinge the weapon forward, okay? This is why this one's called your pivot pin. Takedown and pivot pin, all right? What I prefer to do is, instead of fiddling around with a gun like this, I go ahead and remove my pivot pin as well, like so. And that allows me to work with two halves instead of a floppy hole, okay? So, yes, you can laugh at that all you want. Now, here is the internal components of your bolt stop and bolt release. You can see both of your takedown and pivot pin. You can see the trigger hammer itself. Now, you never want to fire the trigger with the gun disassembled and allow it to strike the receiver. This is called a lower receiver. This whole thing here is a unit. This is a lower receiver. This whole thing as a unit is an upper receiver. Okay, upper, lower receiver. They receive each other. They hold stuff together. Okay. If you do need to release the hammer spring tension, put your thumb over the top of it and then fire the weapon and slowly let it come down, because this is very hardened steel versus aluminum. The steel wins. You can actually crack your receiver if you're not careful. So slowly release hammers. Never just let it fall. Never just let the hammer fall. Okay. You can see the components inside of there. There's a couple sear surfaces and things like that that the trigger holds on to, and that's how it functions. Now it's on safety. It won't fire. And when I want it to fire, I place the weapon on fire and I can pull the trigger and let it down very safely with my thumb. Don't let it dry fire, okay? Not while it's disassembled. Now here's your buffer. It has a detent that you saw me just press down with my thumb. This is your recoil spring and buffer, this buffer is a weight, and when this thing cycles, this is what's helping to reduce your recoil, control your bolt carrier, and send all that mass back forward at the end of the firing cycle. Go ahead, make sure we're lined up, and then you see that detent holds the buffer in place, like so. All right, and now let's talk about the upper a little bit. Don't worry too much about cleaning in here and stuff like that. We'll talk about that more when we're live and in person. I just want you guys to be able to see the weapon, how it's designed, and understand its functions. So you saw I pulled that T-handle, my charging handle out. Now you leave the charging handle in and you grab the bolt carrier. All right, bolt carrier assembly. That's the whole thing put together. And then your T-handle comes to a point and then it lifts out. See how it's got 2 notches on it? Here. It has to lift out. It can't just go straight in. So, now you can see the guts of the rifle with nothing in them. All right, so that receiver is now empty. Here's your bolt carrier and bolt. Now there's a couple components here that we need to talk about really quickly. All right, this pin is called the firing pin retaining pin. You use your nail and you pull it out and it looks like a little cotter pin, but it's actually called a firing pin retaining pin. Make sure that can focus on there for you. Okay, firing pin retaining pin. Then once you've done that, you can turn the bolt with the bolt face up, give it a little tap maybe, and your firing pin, will drop out. So the retaining pin was no longer holding the firing pin, and then there's your firing pin. Now, after that point, the firing pin is what holds the cam pin in place. Now you can rotate the cam pin 90 degrees and remove the cam pin from the bolt carrier. That is your cam pin, okay? All right, and what it does is it cams on this camway, that surface. It's what rotates the bolt. But once the cam pin has been removed, the bolt itself can be removed from the carrier. So now you have an empty carrier we can see through. Okay, this is called the gas key because it's like a key and it keys up with the gas tube. The gas tube mates up with that particular hole, and then that's what operates the gas system. All right, now here's your bolt. You want to inspect your bolt carefully. You look at each one of the 8 lugs, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One's right here on the extractor. You want to look at them, look for cracks, serious signs of wear, any sort of major issue that might raise the alarm flag that there's a problem or that one of them could break. You look carefully at your extractor, and what I do is gently, you do not want to mess up your firing pin. You put a little bit of pressure on the extractor and you just gently press with the firing pin. That took almost no effort. If it's hard, you're breaking something. Okay, I mean that was nothing. I did it like pinky, index finger grip there, nothing to it. And then you pull the pin out of the extractor, and what you'll find in here is an extractor spring, and then it has a rubber buffer inside of it. I know you guys cannot see that, that's okay. The military guns will also have a rubber O-ring the same size as the spring. The inside diameter of the O-ring will be the same size as the outside diameter of the spring, and it goes over it. That's because those weapons fire in full automatic mode and they need a little bit more extractor tension. In other words, it has more pressure on the extractor. Normal semi-automatic fire does not require it. But it doesn't hurt, I'll put it that way. It doesn't hurt to have it. All right, and you look in here and you can see where the firing pin moves in the firing pin channel. You just inspect all these parts. Make sure they're good, make sure everything looks good. It doesn't have to be spotless cleaned. I would much rather it be properly lubricated and a little dirty than spotless clean and dry, because a dry AR-15 is not a happy AR-15 or M-4 or whatever variant of these weapons. So now that we've reassembled that, I check my ejector spring tension, feels good. That whole thing ejects the cartridge out. So the extractor extracts, the ejector ejects. And your gas rings, inspect them to make sure that they're in good shape. These look pretty good. All right. Make sure that they're not aligned. You want to kind of have them staggered a little bit. It's not the end of the world if they're aligned, but you know, it makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside when they're not aligned. Okay? Now, this bad boy only goes in one way. The gas key is the top, the bolt here, the extractor must be on the starboard side, the right side, like so, okay? Now, once you do that, you line up your cam way with the cam pin hole. You drop your cam pin in, and you rotate it 90 degrees, the opposite of the way you disassembled it, okay? Then you can insert your firing pin. You make sure it's in completely. Do not let it stick out too far from the rear, because if you do, you'll insert your firing pin retaining pin, and it won't retain the firing pin because it won't have any surface to grab onto. All right, so now, yep, the firing pin retaining pin is retaining the firing pin, and I can do a tension check and make sure that the cam pin and everything is functioning properly. That's a good way to do it. And you can know if your gas rings are worn out by taking the bolt carrier and setting it like this, vertical on a surface. If you set it vertical on a surface like that, and without any human intervention, it does this and falls, you need new gas rings, okay? It should be able to have enough tension that when you set it down, it will stay up, okay? Easy day. Now, make sure that that's pretty clean. It ain't gotta be crazy, but make sure it's pretty clean. Make sure that this is clean. There are different devices and things that we'll use in the cleaning room. I'll show you guys when we get a chance, but you wanna make sure your upper receiver is clean. The chamber, the barrel, the bolt carrier group, that is the heart of this gun. That is what will make it reliable. So now for reassembly, we take our T-handle and we lay it in until we find the notches. There we go, we found the notches. Then you push it forward slightly. So it's just chilling out like that. It's kind of locked in place. You make sure your bolt is extended, and then you insert the gas key into the trough that is in the charging handle. And then when you push them forward, watch, they'll go in together, watch. And they're locked. Now they're locked, okay? They're in place. I like to always go ahead and close my dust cover. And from there, let's mate up our components in the proper format. Make sure I've got everything the way that I want it with my sling too. There we go. That's the way we want it. And make sure that your pins are fully retracted. And you will take them, place them together. I always try to get the front pivot pin first, like so. Then the takedown pin. And you have a reassembled M-4. Now, when you do a function check, okay, you cannot do the full function check on this one because it is not fully automatic. But what you're essentially gonna do is charge it, place the weapon on safe, make sure it's on safe, and you're gonna try to pull the trigger. Nothing, okay? Then you're going to place the weapon on semi-automatic mode. Then you're going to try and pull the trigger. The trigger broke. All right, now you're gonna release the trigger and you should not get a reset. It should just be dead, a dead trigger. Now you're going to charge the weapon and you're gonna do it again. But this time you're gonna trap the trigger to the rear. Let me show you. I'm gonna trap the trigger to the rear. I did not release it. I'm going to hold pressure on the trigger and then charge it again. Watch. Now I never released this pressure on the trigger. Now when I release, I should hear a reset. Ready? got a reset, okay? The reset means that the trigger is now ready to pull again. Now we're gonna pull it and wait for the click. Hammer fell, okay? So now we know that in semi-automatic mode, this thing is properly function checked with one last thing. Once the hammer has been dropped and it's been fired, this weapon should not go back on safety. Mine will not go back on safety. That's as far as we can do it here in this mode. If we had full automatic mode, we would also check the 3-round burst feature for those, or we would check to make sure that it resets and fires every single time with every pull, every hold of the trigger as well. So we'll do that and we'll look at it when we're live and in person, but you get the idea. You're making sure your important components work, okay? So if you have any questions about this, please send me a text or something on the WhatsApp. We can do more in-depth stuff if you want to later on, but that's the basic concepts of the M-4 carbine from tip to butt, all the nomenclature, all the important parts. Now the thing that we need to talk about is magazines. These are 30-round magazines. Yes, they are loaded with M193 ammunition. That's fine. I'm on my own private property. Who cares? So I have a couple accessories on mine, but these are the basic Stenag 30-round aluminum 5.56 mags. They do a great job. You want to inspect their feed lips to make sure the geometry is proper on them and they're not all whacked out and out of spec. All these are pretty good. They feed well. I use them for just training and practice and stuff like that. This one's a 2. I got coupled together so I don't have to reload as much. But needless to say, what I always like to do is if I'm going to load a 30-round magazine to full capacity, which you will not have to do for the qualification course. You'll put 5 or 10 rounds in them, that's about it. All right, but I don't put 30. I put 29, and I'll show you why. So when you have 30 loaded into these things, there's almost no room left for travel. But when you put 29, watch. See that little bit of give? That's it. If you put one more in there, you would have almost no give. Well, sometimes you might need to load these weapons on a closed bolt. When you have an open bolt, it's easy to insert the magazine. But when you have a closed bolt, there's resistance that is met. Okay? So that resistance, all right, so you push, hear the click, and pull to make sure it's locked in. If you only put 29, it's almost guaranteed every time you'll get it to click and lock. If you put 30, sometimes on a closed bolt, you won't get that click, okay? So that's why I prefer to utilize a 29 load instead of 30. All right, so that's the long and short of it. We can go over load and unload procedures when we're there live and in person. I feel like it would be far more effective, but I just wanted to go over the basic nomenclature and important things so that you would not be completely unfamiliar with these weapons. All right, some basic safety stuff before we go. Treat, never keep, okay? Treat every weapon as if it was loaded, all right? Never point your weapon at anything that you don't intend to destroy, all right? Keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire, and keep the weapon on safe until you intend to fire, okay? Basically, if you follow those 4 universal firearm safety rules of treat them like they're loaded, don't point them at anything you don't want to, keep your finger off the trigger, and keep the weapon on safe until you're ready to go. Yeah, I mean, that's it. If you do that, you'll be good, okay? So keep it on safe. And when you are holding this thing, this little shelf makes a perfect ledge to rest your trigger finger on. So keep positive control of the gun, 2 hands on it, and then put this finger here, all right? Don't put it in here. Don't put it anywhere weird. And then also don't rest it here because you'll eject your magazine, okay? And what good is the gun with no bullets, all right? So put it here in this nice little flat spot Eugene Stoner gave you, the guy that designed the rifle. Put it right here. Walk around like this, positive control, 2-handed grip, slung, whatever you need to do, weapon on safe. When it's time to go, all right, you'll acquire a threat, you'll realize it's there, you'll come up on target, all right, sweep the weapon off of safety, and you can press the trigger, okay? That's how it works. So if there's any questions, like I said, hit me up. Guys, hope this was helpful. You guys take care, all right?